Hello, I am the gaming superhero, and we are starting off with the main man himself, instead of saving him for the end of the month, because today's the day Daredevil Born Again releases, so I have devised the best way to implement him into the game. At least I hope I have. But before that, let's see where he first showed up. Matthew Michael Murdock, aka Daredevil, first appeared in, and you're never going to believe this, Daredevil #1. Crazy, I know, but it's true. We are promised a story different from any other. We open with Daredevil fighting lowlifes in Fogwell's gym, where he quips like Spider-Man. Exactly like Spider-Man. It's a bit distracting. But we then transition to a flashback going to the 1950s, which was supposed to be not nearly as long as it is now, where Matt's dad, battling Murdoch, is telling his son to focus on education and studying over socializing with literally anyone. He can't play football, he can't do Indian wrestling. I don't know what that is, and the image is no help whatsoever. These two are having the most devious and intense handshake ever shared by two human beings, and I don't know what's happening with the other three. There is no wrestling whatsoever, and no Indians, but I'm less upset about that part. That's actually a bit of a positive. But anyway, this goes on until Matt saves an old man from being hit by a truck, being blinded while his father is signing a deal to fight for a man called the Fixer, who explicitly states he will not have to throw fights. So I'm sure that will work out. Anyway, Matt has to adapt to his new way of seeing the world and goes to state college. Not in-state college, but state college. You know, in state of Soda next to Townsville. Skip to Matt just about to graduate, and he and Foggy, who is his roommate, I think I forgot to mention that part, go to see Matt's dad fight, but the Fixer turns out to be untrustworthy, and tells Matt's dad to throw the fight, which he refuses to do because his son is watching, and because of this, he is killed. Thus, we go back to the present, which is only a few weeks after the murder, to realize this is Matt's first excursion as Daredevil, and he is chasing the Fixer, who has a heart attack mid-chase and dies. That is the first appearance of Daredevil. It was a long one, and no mention of Catholicism, interestingly enough, and the story explicitly states that he can feel the different colors of the fabric when he is making his suit, so no excuses about the gaudy color palette being due to his blindness. He knew exactly what he was doing. But let's get on to the kit. His primary fire is melee with his billy club. Nothing crazy here. Next is his movement, which is a double jump and a single swing, similar to Spider-Man except less flexible, closer to the version of the swing he has if you don't make it manual in the settings. Less but still effective. He also needs to have a good height to activate it, so, do the double jump first or jump from an elevated ledge. His passive is, of course, his sonar sense. He can see enemies through walls up to 30 meters. Then the next 15 after that, he sees the silhouettes go in and out. They sort of blink and are less clear. And then beyond that, he doesn't see anything. So he can see where people are at a good portion of the map. This is a pretty standard idea for Daredevil, but that doesn't mean it isn't a good idea. It is balanced out by him being a melee character that still needs to get to them, as well as his allies can't see the enemies through walls. At least not usually, but we'll get to that. His first ability is Billy Toss. Throw a billy club at an enemy, it will then bounce between up to 3 other enemies, if any are nearby, dealing damage to all of them. A simple ranged option that can also help with going against multiple enemies at once. Ability 2 is Devil's Pull. Select an enemy to dash towards them, dealing a lot of damage to that one enemy, and then less damage to nearby enemies, but still a radius. Again, to encourage going against multiple enemies to jump into the group and fight them all and disrupt, in order to differentiate him from the other melee characters that focus on backline hit and runs, and Wolverine, meant to delete tanks. Ability 3, Battling Matt. Increase damage output depending on how many enemies are nearby upon activation, also gaining damage resistance if all 6 enemies are nearby. Think Wrecking Ball adaptive shield ability, except instead of gaining exponential shield, Daredevil gains exponential bonus damage, depending on how many enemies are in the radius. I also gave him a little bonus if he jumped into a full 6-man team to reward proper playstyle play. This also functions on a personality level, with Daredevil being known to jump headfirst into a fight while greatly outnumbered. Obviously, with values not being specified, it's hard to say if any of this is overpowered, but I believe there is a way to balance this with simple number shifts if the initial numbers tend to be too strong, which is the real marker of a good kit. One that doesn't need to be like wholly reworked with new abilities, just ones that can be tweaked a bit. For the ultimate, fair fight, throw a projectile that will deploy a smokescreen, completely blinding enemies inside. It is a fairly large radius, similar to a Psylocke ult, with the blinding effect being a complete blind and not like cloaks, only blind beyond a certain point blindness. When in the radius, you can't see a thing. The blindness will also persist for a second or two after leaving the radius, just to add a bit more effectiveness. Also, as a cool interaction, Daredevil's passive persists even with the blind, so he can still see the outlines of enemies, making it pretty much useless against them. This also applies to Cloak's blind, just a fun character thing, adding to the reason to give him the passive. He is immune to blinds. Finally, we have the team-up with who else but Spider-Man, called Super Senses, where Spidey's Spider Sense now shows the outlines of enemies that trigger it. Very simple, but nice bonus to have. Is also what I meant when I said earlier that sometimes allies will be able to see Daredevil's radar sense. This is that case, which isn't even necessarily what's happening here, but it's gaining the ability a little bit. I don't see anyone going out of their way to trigger this one, but there are plenty that people don't really go out of their way for anyway, so these two are known for teaming up, so I had to give them something, and this just felt right. It was perfect, putting their two skill sets together. And that is how I would bring the Man Without Fear to Marvel Rivals. When I started putting this kit together, it was a very standard melee character, and I was kind of just going very basic, because there wasn't a lot of I could think of until I thought about what role or purpose I think he would fill in the game, and decided on Frontline Disruptor, a character best suited for fighting more than one person, a whole team even, more than just one person, with most of his abilities being most effective when used against a clumped together team, making him different from Wolverine, who is more of a standard tank buster character, and very different from a lot of the other melee characters who are more backline assassins who hit and run. Overall, I am very happy with where this kit ended, and I'm starting to notice, doing all of these, that the really big popular characters are a bit boring and easy to make kits for. With the smaller, more obscure characters, they give more freedom for wilder kits, which you will see firsthand next week. Stay tuned for that. But remember, you also subscribe and get your friends to do the same, because at 100 subscribers, I make a Discord to have more in-depth discussion on all things Marvel Rivals. And you're welcome for not making any blind jokes. None that you saw.